So, one of the things I think about, George, is the idea that any initiative or research-based intervention has a good chance of failing yes. if we're really not paying attention to some things up front as we're preparing to embark on that initiative. Certainly, some of the things that we often see is there's a lack of professional knowledge building, professional learning that goes on in schools and in districts as they're preparing to take on an initiative like MTSS or even put a new intervention in place. So that's certainly one. Sometimes there's not a support system for ongoing coaching in place that can also impact a school or district's ability to really grow and enhance their initiative as they go. And certainly initiative fatigue often comes into play when this just feels like another layered initiative that doesn't really fit in to some of the existing support structures such as Title I or special education or professional learning. This just becomes another thing we have to do. And sometimes if some of those core processes aren't in place and core supports aren't in place, makes it very difficult to move a large-scale initiative like MTSS forward in a district.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Evan, and I'm going to go back and put myself in the position I was in as a building principal, consider a school level. Whenever we were asked to participate in a new initiative, the first thing that we did was self-reflect about what is it we're doing now that aligns with this initiative. And what's that gap we have to close between our current practices and being able to fully realize that initiative? And I think that's things that leaders have to consider. A lot of times people say, we want to do MTSS, and we'll say, you're already doing some of the components of MTSS, so let's figure out which ones those are and then try to build additional ones in place to make the system more effective. And I've actually worked with many school districts that have all of the elements of MTSS present, but they don't have the system to integrate them. They're all siloed. And they're not integrated, and so for those districts, it's really providing the glue and deciding where things have to go. I think another thing to consider is once again, we talked about this a few minutes ago, but being very sure that everyone understands the why. And all the years, and I'm sure the audience watching this is very familiar with the research of Joyce and Showers, that for 20 years of research, they brought some very poignant factors to the conversation, and that is that educators will embrace change if they clearly understand the need to do it. And then to your point about professional learning, the second factor is whether or not they feel they have the competencies to do it or the support to get those competencies. So I think having the priorities very clear helps the staff as a whole think about, do we have a need for this? And if it's a priority that they have consensus around, you got the first one. But then the second one is, what does that mean for us as a classroom teacher? What does that mean for me as a building principal? What does that mean for the CFO, the assistant superintendent for curriculum? What does all of this mean? And they really have to think about that before they agree to embark. And the last thing I think about, I'm sure we'll talk at some point here about capacity. For me, a district has considered capacity when they can say how many FTE equivalents, whether that's in a body or 25% of your time, 30% of my time, they've actually allocated the resources to the effort and looked to see, before they bite off this much, you don't want to bite off more than you have the resources to do. Right. You can go slow to go fast with this. But what you don't want to do is, and maybe this is another barrier, is thinking, we're going to implement this in 2 years. But it's not resourced to do that. So I think matching those resources in human capital, in addition to the professional learning or what have you, a good leader will say, how many FTE is this going to cost me? Where am I going to get it from? Do I have to add more people? I am asked the question all the time, how much does MTSS cost? My first question is, how well are you using the resources that you have? Because you're just not going to bring on a lot of people to add to another system when they may already have those resources.
Well, I think in the interest of breaking down some of those district silos, I mean, often we'll have to bring all those folks together to really agree upon why are we doing this. And each department may have a different element that they care about that MTSS is going to help solve for if they put that problem solving in place, if they put the resource allocation in place. But they need to understand, you know, what's in it for me and the things that I care about. If I'm in special education, then I care about my students in special education. If I direct English learner supports, then I care about that. If I direct Title I. So making sure that there's something clearly in this for each of those departments as they come together to form this leadership team, I think is really, you know, is a critical piece. The other piece that we often see is fidelity and adaptability of these initiatives. If we go in thinking, gosh, I have to implement in this way, and I just can't be, I'm averse to change when the data is coming back saying, gosh, this isn't working the way we thought, bringing that leadership team together, whether it's at the district or school level, to really problem solve the initiative itself when data says we're not getting the return that we're looking for, we're not seeing the improvements. There's often a resistance to that because we want to, well, the book says MTSS is implemented this way and we follow these steps, and so it often, that interest in being faithful to implementation, whether it's at a district level MTSS or it's implementing an intervention in a classroom, can often lead us astray when we don't recognize that, well, there are real teachers that have to implement this and real students that have to respond to the intervention. So we want to always keep that adaptability and flexibility core to our thinking when we're implementing initiatives like MTSS.